Over the course of a nearly 7-decade career, both as a businessman and elected official, S. Clark Butler left his mark on the county and on the state of Florida. On October 10, 2008, at the age of 89, he passed away in his home. While he certainly will be remembered for transforming Gainesville and Alachua County through his entrepreneurial vision, he will also be remembered for his personal generosity and his community philanthropy.
Clark Butler's life journey was not an easy one. He was born in Horseshoe, Florida, March 2, 1919. His grandfather and great-grandfather were the first settlers in 1848. As such, they experienced primitive conditions. Through self-determination and hard work, they survived and made a home. When Clark was 1 year old, his father, Edward, moved the family to Plant City to start a farm with strawberries as the main crop. The schools there were called strawberry schools as they were closed during the crop-picking season, which meant that they were open during the heat of summer in order to complete the necessary days of school. Clark was one of 5 children, having 1 sister and 3 brothers. The family was a close-knit one and stuck together, making it through hard times. Clark was destined to make something out of his life for both family and the community in which he lived. In high school, there were free lunches available for needy children. But Clark went down the street and worked in a general store for an hour in exchange for a bologna sandwich and a cold cola, so as not to take the free lunches from the kids that really needed them. At this time, Clark worked weekends at a fresh produce market in Tampa. While visiting his brother Bob on a trip to Gainesville, he noticed that the produce markets were inferior to what he knew of Tampa, and he saw an opportunity. As the youngest child at home, he convinced his parents and his older brother Bill that they would move to Gainesville and start a new life. Understand that Clark's parents were in their 70s at the time. By the spring of 1939, the family had saved up $300, sold the mule, loaded up their 1930 Model A truck, and moved to Gainesville. Here, they rented a house in a black neighborhood for $30 a month. Their next-door neighbor were Charles Chestnut's grandparents. And down the street, Clark found a lot perfect for a produce stand on Northwest 8th Avenue and Northwest 4th Street. He rented it for $8 a month from an African-American woman named Annie Edwards. The family worked 7 days a week to sustain the produce stand. Unlike their peers, they did business with both blacks and whites during a time of segregation. There were many times when Clark remarked, "Had it not been for the black community, we wouldn't have survived." Each morning at 2 o'clock, Clark and his brother would drive the truck to Jacksonville to buy fresh produce from the Setzer family warehouse. They would then drive back and sell produce from the stand. They were open 7 days a week and gave curb service to the ladies so that they wouldn't have to get out of their car when they drove up to buy the produce. In the 1940s, the produce stand was added on to 3 separate times to create a 14,000 square foot grocery store. This became the first modern grocery store in Gainesville and was never closed even for 1 day during the expansion. After the war, Clark met Mary Catherine Veach, and it was love at first sight for both of them. He could identify with Mary Catherine as she was a person of conviction like him, strong and ambitious and intelligent with a delightful sense of humor. She had also come through a life of poverty. She, too, worked throughout junior high school and high school to help her family have enough money to make ends meet. When Mary Catherine and Clark got married, Mary Catherine had all the money as she saved every dime that she could and bought war bonds to protect her savings. Her savings made the down payment on a house and allowed them to purchase a car and furniture and helped build the business. Rather than Clark splurging on a diamond engagement ring, she insisted he put those funds back into the business. Clark was destined for public service. His father was county commissioner in Mayo. His grandfather, James D. Butler, is pictured here with President Taft in the Rose Room at the White House in 1913. With Mary Catherine's support, Clark rose in prominence for his business acumen and was asked by a group of men in the business community to run for city commission. In 1952, at age 31, he agreed to this call even though he had never been to a commission meeting. T. Allen Crouch, a Gainesville attorney, was one of the group that asked him to run for office. Mr. Crouch said, "He didn't play politics and he didn't favor insiders. He opened city government to the public so that each citizen could be involved." The first thing Clark noticed as a city commissioner was that city contracts were not put out to bid. Clark felt that if his business put purchasing out to a competitive bid, why shouldn't the same advantage exist for the taxpayer? Each week on Thursday, Clark would stock the grocery to the gills for the weekend business. One Thursday night he got a call at home and was told that the grocery store had caught fire. The store's tin roof had had a hole cut into it, and someone had intentionally started the fire. With the grocery store burned down, he and Mary Catherine had to start all over again. Clark had lost 20 pounds in the ensuing months. During this time, a large Florida utility wanted to buy Gainesville Regional Utilities, or GRU, for $5 million while Clark was a commissioner. The pressure was on to sell. Clark said that a short-term gain of $5 million didn't make sense, and it paled in comparison to the long-term advantage of keeping GRU as an independent utility. GRU now makes an annual contribution of $20 million to the Gainesville General Fund. At the time, the infrastructure of Gainesville was growing, and there was a desire to extend Main Street to 16th Avenue, beyond 8th Avenue where it stopped at the time. Setzer Grocers was considering moving to Gainesville and said that if the city would extend its boundaries, they would purchase a lot on which to build. If the Main Street was not extended, they would purchase the property where Clark's grocery store had previously been. Clark was in position to make considerably more money by voting against the extension and selling his property to the Setzer family. Due to the fire, this was a time when he desperately needed the money. Instead, he voted to extend Main Street. Mr. Setzer sought him out later to shake his hand for his integrity and for his ultimately doing the right thing. Prior to Gainesville's current mayor, Pegeen Hanrahan, Clark was the youngest mayor of Gainesville. As mayor, he started the Boys Club on Waldo Road, and he opened a new library on University Avenue. While he was mayor, a new passenger airline terminal was built. Banker and mentor Justice Williams had been so impressed with the way Clark had added on to the store without even closing that he offered to loan him $20,000 to build homes. Clark's first housing development was in the pre-civil rights era, and it was difficult then for African Americans to get loans for mortgages. To get around that, Clark would do contracts for deeds of ownership for the African American community so that they could get into homes as the banks weren't cooperating. Clark was truly colorblind when it came to people in his community. At that time, Mr. and Mrs. Tom Coward, a young African American couple, wanted to buy a home from Clark, and he made the same appeal to the bank for them. But the mortgage officials told Clark they wouldn't provide a black couple a loan. Clark persisted, and the bank finally agreed to the loan if Clark brought the bank 5 additional white loan mortgages. Clark made it happen. Clark went on to become the founding president of the Gainesville Home Builders Association and developed many significant areas of the Gainesville housing market. He built the Millhopper Shopping Center at the corner of Northwest 16th, where the Publix is today, and residential developments such as Westmoreland Estates on 43rd Street, Sunnybrook, Fernwood, and Palmview Estates. While developing the Millhopper Shopping Center, Clark went to New York City with a map of Gainesville to try and get Woolworth's corporate executives interested in the project. The Woolworth's representatives instead asked Clark about Archer Road for the development. At the time, Archer Road was a dirt airstrip with no I-75 interchange, but it did have access to 34th Street. Clark then called Justice Williams, the president of Florida National Bank, regarding the land, and Justice replied, "There's nothing there, but if you're set on it, I'll put you in touch with some potential investors." In 1970, he bought land next to Archer Road. The Department of Transportation, the University of Florida, and the community wanted to 4-lane it, but Clark disagreed. He thought it would quickly become obsolete with the rate that UF was growing and would continue to grow. He recommended a 6-lane road. The DOT noted, the state can't afford to purchase the land needed for 6 lanes, as there was a railroad right-of-way on the south side of the street. So Clark purchased the railroad right-of-way himself, and the 6-lane road was built, as well as the interchange at I-75 and Archer. It was at this time he was trying to build a shopping center to serve the people of Gainesville, Butler Plaza. In 1982, Roy Lambert approached Clark about syndicating properties. These two men turned out to be kindred spirits. Roy has a passion for entrepreneurship and approached the University of Florida in the mid-1990s to create an endowment for his friend, colleague, and business associate, Clark Butler. He wanted a fund that would grow and build a program of entrepreneurship. This fund has now earned over $40 million and brought the world's best businessmen and businesswomen to the University of Florida. It's proven to be a tremendous legacy. Like many entrepreneurs, Clark was not content focusing on one business endeavor. In 1977, with the help of his attorney and friend Bill Andrews and his mentor banker Justice Williams, he organized Gainesville State Bank, the first of what would be emulated by many community banks in this area. The bank grew to 7 branches. When the bank was sold years later to Compass Bank, it had grown to $200 million. Highly active in the bank, Clark was chairman of the board for 20 years. Clark was fortunate when his daughter Deborah joined the company in 1984. Working together, they expanded Butler Plaza to over 1 million square feet and created a power center of national prominence. Clark freely credited his daughter and business partner Deborah as being an important contributor in making Butler Plaza into the thriving enterprise that it's become. Clark was asked what he considered to be his greatest achievement. Being in the building business for over 50 years, he felt strongly about the free enterprise system. When the legislature passed a title insurance law in 1991 that would not allow a person to negotiate the cost of title insurance, he filed suit against that law as it mandated exorbitant fees to be charged for securing title insurance. After 6 years of legal battles, the law was ultimately ruled illegal by the Circuit Court of Florida. The 10 title insurance companies appealed the decision, and a year later the law was ruled unconstitutional by the Florida Supreme Court. He credits Bill Andrews and Cynthia Chestnut for their support of his efforts. Even with all of his professional successes and hard work, it would appear that business and development was the center of his life. But actually, it was his family. Clark and Mary Catherine had 3 children, Clark Butler Jr., Catherine Ann, and Deborah Jean. Philanthropy and helping others was his passion. Over the course of his life, Clark gave a lot to the homeless because he was so close to losing his home time and time again as he was building his life and his businesses. Clark's family took people in that would be walking along the street with nothing to eat and would share their dinner with them. His belief and feeling was that could have been us. Plus, it was simply the right thing to do. He was known to say that your integrity is everything. You have to live with yourself at the end of the day. Never compromise your integrity.